Hello, and welcome to Pwnery's Breaking News. I'm going to have to edit the title. I forgot to fix that. But this is a Pwnery's Breaking News special issue called the World at War Edition. Or actually, sorry, the War Room Edition. I just got the title totally messed up. But anyway, yeah, this week is going to be about as serious as a heart attack. I've got a lot of panelists, we've got a lot of material to cover. So, with that being said, let me go ahead and start dragging everyone in, because you can't see them, but you soon will. This is Galileo Gonzalez, known on gun channels as Zorro117, back when we used to have a gun channels. He will be in and out throughout the chat today. I will fix the title of this later, I promise. You'll see. Next is, this is Mike. This is also Night Strike. He also hosts several shows throughout the week. Tuesday nights at 9 o'clock is his usual hit or miss. He also does sometimes the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or even sometimes a Sunday Night Strike, depending on what the mood suits.
It's depending on my schedule, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for the invite.
This is Scott P79. He's usually my week in review cohort, which you will probably get used to seeing, or have already seen. So he will be here to offer his insights as well. And last but not least, Warsaw Patriot. Oh, wait, I gotta drag him back in. Hang on. Here? Yeah, okay. So this is Warsaw Patriot, who is actually a regular on Hit or Miss. I think I've also seen him over at Zeke Shoots, right?
Yeah, he's a very good friend of Zeke's.
Right, so this is going to be a pretty good panel. Let me go ahead and click this over here so we're in multi-panel view here. We are live. We are available on the YouTube side of the show. Let me see if I can fix this while I'm at here. Yeah, actually I can. Cool. All right, so I should have did this before. This is my own failing. There, and then save that. And that should fix that. So now the title's correct. So anyway, we were actually scheduled to do a gaming chat, which would have tied the gun community to the gaming community and all this other, light-hearted stuff. However, much
The
like
shit has hit the fan.
yeah, like much global conflict usually works, it sort of throws a monkey wrench into all your plans, and I thought that it would be poor form to talk about something so entertaining and lighthearted while people are literally dying. So
Yeah.
we decided to go ahead and cut in for this, which is why we have a different backdrop, the way the whole show looks. If you like it, leave a comment or whatever. We can talk about that. If you want to be part of my regular panels, usually on the week shows, or if we ever do these in the future, just hit me up and I'll keep you in mind and send you invites and information. Usually we go over like the show prep or the topics on display that we're going to talk about, for this particular show. I don't really have a solid format for this right now, but good God, I have had all day of just absorbing what was going on and preparing for today's show. So it's going to be a lot of meat, very little potatoes, and absolutely no fucking slimy Russian borscht.
Ugh.
So that being said,
Hate borscht.
yeah, well, beet soup is not exactly the greatest, but he put a little sour cream on there and it's not awful.
No,
It's tolerable.
I hate beets with a passion. I cannot eat beets. I want to blow beets up.
I'll eat beets before I have to eat freaking barley porridge because you have to wonder how those fucking people still have teeth left.
I
Anyway,
know.
let's keep it serious today.
Okay.
So, for those of you who have either lived under a rock or are too busy playing house in a life you could probably compare to a breakfast cereal commercial, um, this is a very disturbing and saddening case of a group of people that I've been talking to for the last 2 months, which I like to call Team Never Gonna Happen. And now they've been slapped across the face backhandedly by me, Team I Told You Fucking So. And the reason I've been saying this is because right now we have this very strange geopolitical environment where too many soft, weak people have been sitting on their hands because they've never seen, heard, or experienced war or anything like war in their lifetime. So they believe I've never seen it, therefore it never exists, and it could never happen. Boy, are they getting a lesson today. Because what you may not have known, because you don't turn on the TV or listen to the radio or have friends like me, is there is a global conflict going on, the likes that the world has not seen probably since World War II. And what I wanted to sort of talk about is the warmonger's mindset for this. Because those of you who know me throughout the years personally, I have a psychology and sociology background, and I took it up to a nearly a PhD level. I backed out when they kept pushing me into the MD program, which I had no interest in. So I got that working for me. I minored in criminal pathology also, so I sort of know how a deviant mind works. It's also a character flaw because I always profile my friends and they hate that.
Well, it doesn't
Regardless,
help that your profile also has a little deviancy too.
it does because I've had a pretty checkered past, but I have no felonies, so that's cool. Um,
Neither do I.
anyway, um, I want to delve into the criminal or the warmonger's mindset slightly here, because this is a I'll admit this is opinion based. Okay, I tried to join the armed services 4 times, and by the fourth time I got 4F'd for physical. So it's not for a lack of trying. The first 3 times was actually because of misinformation. Essentially, they told me I needed to do one thing. I did that thing. I came back and they said, "Oh, you need another thing." I did that thing. By the time I finished the third thing they asked me, I didn't pass the physical. So, whatever. Um, but this whole situation that's going on right now in the Ukraine and the surrounding areas, um, the first thing that I've noticed in all of this is suddenly COVID doesn't fucking matter. So my first question is the Russian incursion into the Ukraine going to be considered a super spreader event? You don't have to answer that. I'm being sarcastic. Um, the second thing is this is a very disturbing case of what I feel is, and you can agree or disagree. We can talk about this. This is what this show is about today. I think what is old is new again, and I'm not pleased with it. And the reason I say that is because if you look at what the Russians are doing, they have completely surrounded a sovereign territory and they are attacking it blitzkrieg style on 3 sides. And we'll talk about the numbers. Essentially, the Russians have about 20,000 troops that were stationed in Belarus. They had crossed the border uh, early in the early morning hours, so about 21 hours ago. They were headed towards Kiev, which is about 106 miles, 104 to 106 miles from the capital city. So they had the closest land route to overtake the capital. You had 9,000 stationed troops in Moldova, which is a small satellite country in the southwest corner of the Ukraine, and they had entered from the southwest and began their sortie. And then you had the majority of the Russian armored and air forces on the southeast corner. So you've got these three-pronged attacks coming in every direction, and the entire, well, not the entire, but a large portion of the Russian active navy were pretty much just at anchor or close to at anchor, battle stations anchor, I guess you can call it, right off the southern coast of Ukraine. So this is a nation that's been completely surrounded, and everyone just kept saying, "Oh, this is just Russian posturing. Oh, he's just putting on the pressure to make them cave. Oh, this was going to happen." And I kicked and screamed and yelled and argued for weeks. You to quote Crimson Tide, you don't put on a condom unless you're going to fuck, because Russia had ordered medical personnel in plasma and blood to the Eastern Front weeks ahead of time. These are not the actions of somebody who's doing exercises. You do not move medical material that needs to be stored and refrigerated and not moved around until absolutely necessary, you don't do that unless you're planning on moving forward with whatever you're going to do. And a lot of people just stuck their heads in the ground like little political ostriches, or little naive ostriches, or little libtard ostriches, and they were like, it'll never happen. And I would say, where is your opinion based in reality? Because I've never seen it. Oh, okay, so your experience is now religion? I'm sorry, when did you become a world leader? This is what's going on, right? So, this is what's been going on. Right now, the Ukraine from where I am sitting is 8 hours ahead of time. So it is now 4:41 in the morning. 24 hours ago, the Russians began their assault, more or less. There was a joke that they actually started it at 2:22 p.m. on 2/22/22, which the joke was that the Russians were playing odometer games. Some of you know what that means, others just look it up. You'll know what I'm talking about. But at the end of the day, uh, about 24 hours ago, that's when things really started to kick off. Uh, Media outlets and journalists all over the world who were in the area were strapped up in flak vests and flak helmets. They were, doing their best to try to give us the news, and it was coming hot and heavy, and they were like, I can hear explosions in the distance. I can hear this. I can see the jets overhead, and yada, yada, yada. That was what was being fed in last night. They have the capability to attack under the cover of darkness. This is a modern war situation. They have night vision capabilities. They have thermals. They have what they need to do this. And they have 190,000 ground-based troops to do it. That is not a small force to laugh at, especially for a country that's about the size of Massachusetts scrunched up into a ball. Maybe a little bigger. I could be wrong. But the point is that's a lot of troops. That's a lot of firepower. That's a lot of support staff behind that. This wasn't just an exercise. What was it? A little over 30 hours ago, Vladimir Putin had announced publicly that he was recognizing the sovereignty and the separatists, or separate states, of the Russian separatist groups in the Donetsk region. And
Donetsk and Luhansk.
Thank you. I couldn't have pronounced that right now. Those two regions. What was funny is the regions originally drawn were a very tiny portion of the south and eastern portion of the country. However, by the time Putin had drew the borders out, it was the entire lower bottom right third of the Ukraine. Because they said, no, we want all of this, right? So they're attacking on three fronts. The Navy was staged outside the Black Sea. Within 2 hours, they had already claimed that they had disabled all Ukrainian anti-aircraft capability. That part I didn't believe, because everyone said, wait and see. We don't know how many and how devastating that was. But by lunchtime today, noon my time, it would have been 8 p.m. So the daylight operations were already coming to a close, which would have been the end of one full day of combat operations for the Soviet military, right? So by that time, they had completely disabled the Ukrainian air network. They completely destroyed the Ukrainian air defense system, and they not only had they captured the largest civilian airport north of Kiev, Antonov Airport, but they also captured Gostomel Air Base, which is the biggest military air base in Ukraine, which is north of Kiev. So it stands to reason that the forces that came down from Belarus had a large part in that, because they were only 104 miles away from the capital. But it gets worse, because on the way to Kiev, they decided to stop and just, why don't we just take a little trip to Chernobyl and take it over? So they did. They took over Chernobyl today.
Retake,
because it used to be theirs. But this is going to lead to a question, and I'll get to it eventually. So they got the Air Force Base, They've got the largest airport. Now you have cut off the major evacuation port of the country.
Mm.
They waged cyber warfare to break up GPS and communications and logistics. Um, the Ukrainians, not to be deterred, announced that they had been able to destroy 15 tanks in the first wave of their assault because we have been providing us, the Canadians, the British, we have been providing them with Javelin missiles, which, if anybody knows anything about military incursion, bringing tanks into an urban environment is the worst possible place you can put a tank because the roads are tight, the gun barrel sticks out really far, it's very hard to maneuver, and everybody is shooting down on you from buildings. But before they even got to the buildings, 15 tanks were knocked out by javelins. That's pretty impressive for a very small country, right? I mean, we're arming them,
Hmm.
but this is happening.
Mhm.
So that's pretty impressive. We're like, okay, these guys have some fight in them. They also reported that they shot down 6 Russian warplanes, and if I'm not mistaken, Scott found out that they were all shot down by one pilot. He became an ace in a single day. Pretty amazing, actually. And
Yeah.
2 Russian helicopters were shot down.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So they're not just rolling over. If you look at the way that the Ukrainian population is set up right now, it's sort of split into thirds. You have a third of the population who are sort of separatist, and they're just like, no, we want to be, part of Mother Russia, right? They want to be back with it. You have another third who's just like, listen, don't fight, just let them in so we can go on with our lives. Because chances are, those are the type of people who probably are not going to be very affected by it anyway. So you got about a third of people like that. And then you've got a third, like the President Zelensky, who said, we will fight to the last man. They actually love their sovereignty and they will die for it. So it's kind of a weird situation because it's like NATO supports Zelensky, the Russians support the separatists, and everybody hates Chris in the case of nobody likes somebody who's indifferent, which means they're the fence sitter that you're trying to propagandize to see it your way. Because at the end of the day, they just want to be left alone. They're like, I don't care who's in charge as long as my shop isn't burnt to the ground and I can open up tomorrow, right? There's a lot of people like that. I mean, we have that in this country. So that's going off. You've got Putin today. Well, it would be this morning for us, but it would have been midday for them. He basically issued a decree stating that if anybody interferes with his military operations in the Ukraine, that you will see a type of warfare that has never been witnessed in history. That sounds like a nuclear threat to most of the world, and that's how it was perceived and taken. And at first, that sounds dangerous because this guy's got ICBMs and Satan missiles, and he's got the Belgorod, which is like the doomsday submarine of hell, right? He's got these tools at his disposal, so it sounds really scary. But then you find out he takes over Chernobyl, and you're like, this fucker's gonna make dirty bombs. That's something the world has never seen before on the battlefield. The world has seen nuclear weapons because we dropped them. So what he's saying is something different. Then he takes over Chernobyl and you sort of tie the two together and you're like, I see what you're doing. So you got that going on. All civilian flights in and out of the Ukraine supposedly have been shut down because the airspace has been shut down because the Russians are flying over killing everything. So there's that.
Mm.
The Ukrainian government was distributing weapons to the population because they are anticipating guerrilla warfare street to street. So part of that whole what is old is new again, I'm leading into this here, is the Russians, with the way they're attacking the Ukraine, is similar to Nazi Germany's playbook into Poland circa 1939. Like the whole method of how this is going.
Correct.
And then if
They're
you look at
blitzing, but they're blitzing in a Russian style because
correct, but
Russian style tactics are to surround and siege your enemy, and then go encroach further in.
well, but the playbook is this is not a
Hmm.
new idea.
No, it's
And
not.
then at the same time, we've had stories of the Chinese Air Force has been has been fucking around with Taiwan basically today. And I
Sadly.
think Patrick had solid numbers. It was like 37 different incidents of this, which means they're sort of poking and prodding at the perimeter to see what the Taiwanese response is. But here's the scary thing. The Chinese on their coastal batteries, to the west of Taiwan, they have rocket artillery capabilities that can blanket the entire island of Taiwan, meaning they can soften up the target without ever putting a single boot on the ground. And I think that's what Xi Jinping was planning on doing, is he wants to calculatedly take out military targets over Taiwan first, and then basically beat them into submission, and then just so that way they can say, look, we give up, quit trying to destroy our country. And then the Chinese just walk right in and administer the area. Because that's what China wants. They want Taiwanese industry, right? They want the sovereignty of the nation too. They want to take the country over. They want to bring them to heel, but they also want to make the money off of it. So you've got this going on at the same time. This was almost a week after a photo was shown of Putin and Xi Jinping chatting it up like two lovebirds at the Olympics. It was almost as if like they were there just to say, "Okay, this is the day we're going to do it. Don't forget, mark the date." And look what happens. It all happened on the same day.
Doesn't that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Mm.
So
Adolf Hitler and what's his name? Hirohito?
right. So if you look at the way the Chinese have been doing this, the way that they have been making moves and making threats towards Australia and like most of Polynesia and the islands in Southeast Asia, they are literally playing the Japanese War Manual playbook circa 1938.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the geopolitical climate of Southeast Asia at that time, Japan wanted to expand their empire, but the problem is their war machine was fueled by the United States oil industry. And when we started to see what they were doing, we started pulling their oil, and they were like, "Listen, you just leave us alone to do this shit down here, and we won't bring the war to you. Stop pinching off the hose." We pinched off the hose, they attacked Pearl Harbor. But at the
And then
time, they were
yeah.
savaging all of Southeast Asia in the most brutal ways. The Chinese back then were very third
Democratic.
world compared to, Japan's empire at the time. And
They were also
militarily,
democratic.
yeah, and militarily speaking, I mean, they were just ripe for the taking. Those people were beaten and bruised and just like if you've ever seen the movie 30 Seconds Over Tokyo with Van Johnson, it's a classic, black and white movie. That'll give you a good idea of what the Chinese were like pre Mao Zedong. It was very different. I mean, they were peaceful and democratic, like you were saying. I mean, they were just trying to hash it out. And the Japanese came like just warlords. They were just beating and killing and raping and, you know, slave laboring these poor bastards.
And because of the Japanese, that gave rise to the communists that pushed the nationalist government that was democratic out into Taiwan, and they've been there ever since.
Forced out of exile. in
Fair
other words.
assumption. Yeah, fair point. So the point is like some of the Chinese took a history book and read that and go, we can do that better because we've got 1.9 billion people now,
Yeah.
and we're the world's factory. We have become rich off of cheap labor, building everything the world asked for, and just quietly been hoarding money and resources and technology through copyright violations or whatever. And they finally figured out it's their time. And I didn't think we were going to talk about this, but let's go ahead and touch into this. This was a plan put into motion over a decade ago. Xi Jinping doesn't he's not the kind of guy who plays Call of Duty. Let me put it to you that way. He plays Risk. He doesn't know what instant gratification means. What he does is he lifts the childbirth ban in his country to basically breed his future infantry. And then he turns around and he continues to be the world's manufacturer because every time someone sends labor plans for him for cheap labor, he gains the knowledge and technology on how to build the things that he's being asked to build, while he's also hacking the rest of the world's databases to figure out the things he wants to build that we're not giving him. So they're building warships. Yes, they have a nuclear navy. Yes, their boats are the loudest in the ocean, but it doesn't deter from the fact that they still have them. Sure, we can track them. We
How
can
about
track them.
stealth fighter?
They had this plane that was like a cross between an F-35 and a Eurofighter Typhoon. It was weird.
Yeah,
Like,
they stole our records of the F-22 Raptor.
yeah, I mean, they steal everything. I mean, they s- BMW once upon a time sued China for copyright infringement because they made a carbon copy of the X5 SUV and still lost.
Hmm.
They they beat the Germans at their own car and their own legal system and won. It's just insane. Anyway, point is, he's had over 10 years to breed his future army. He's like your classic hyper liberal too, because he goes on the record saying that we're not going to abide we're not going to abide by the what's the
Geneva
thing?
Convention.
No, no, no. It was the thing about like emissions. I forgot what that one was called.
Oh, it's the what is it? The Paris Accords.
Yeah, he said we're not going to abide by the Paris Climate Accords. Maybe we'll consider it around 2050. That he literally said that. Like, maybe we'll think about it around 2050. He's like, I'm too busy militarizing my nation. I'm too busy building warships and industry. I mean, he didn't even hide what he was doing. He was like, we'll consider it by 2050 because he was thinking long game. That's the way that man works. He set up an infrastructure in his own country to breed his military, and then he set up his power to where he was president for life so he can see his vision through. Who does that sound like right now? His ally, Vladimir Putin. Because if you want to
Hmm.
look at world leaders right now, Vladimir Putin is the most experienced world leader, period. He has been in power for 22 years. He
That's
has
3 terms.
he has sat through and dealt with 5 presidential administrations. 5. No other leader in the world has done that. So he knows the game. The first, like, think of it like this. Most world leaders have to deal with the president of the United States, right? They
Hmm.
might deal with just one, and then 8 years later they're gone, right? Maybe you caught one on a midterm, so maybe you have to deal with two. So let's say a world leader has to deal with 2 presidents. The first president he deals with, it's sort of like going on a blind date, right? You don't know each other, you're feeling each other out, you're skeptical, you're kind of side eyeing them. You're not going to let them touch you in certain places, you're just going to feel things out. Both of you are going into this clueless. That's how most world leaders start in the beginning. But let's say you get smart and you caught one on a midterm, or in this case, you caught one like Trump got out in 4 years and you have to get the new guy, right? By the time you're done with feeling out the first one, the second date, you have a little more game plan. You know what you're about to deal with. You know what they're going to sort of tolerate, the regime, and you're going to know what they don't like. So by the second one, you're just like, you can tiptoe the minefield a little bit better because you sort of know where the mines are and you sort of know what they're going to do to you. Putin has had 3 more presidents since then. Okay? What he is doing is the equivalent of going on a date where he knows he's going to have his fist elbow deep in your nether regions by the end of that date. Because he knows what you are, what you can take, what you won't tolerate, but he also knows what your country won't let you get away with. This guy, he walked into Biden's administration balls deep in him already. He knew. He already knew because he got 4 other presidents worth of practice. He was like, I ain't got to worry about shit. That country over there is so fucked with civil unrest and fucking like fairies in the military that we don't even have to worry about them, right? You got Millie wearing like rainbow wigs and shit. They kicked out Mattis because he didn't get along with his commander in chief, but that was probably one of the most dangerous military minds available. You notice nothing happened on Trump's watch militarily, and yet now all of a sudden Biden's in there and like he's just rolled over and presented his asshole to the world. Like, here's my prison purse, come take a look, right? That's what's going on. Putin saw that. We're weak because we're fighting amongst ourselves. We have allowed weak people not only you can allow the weak to have an equal voice socially, but when you allow the weak to dictate everyone else like we have allowed in this country, that is a weakness on a global and geopolitical scale that can be exploited. And here we are right now being exploited.
You know, it's another thing that's also showing weakness. Our own law going against the will of the people of disarming our own populace of our firearms.
Okay, let's touch on this. So right now, you had a truckers' uprising in Canada, and it got to the point where their metrosexual, effeminate little bitch of a leader, I said it,
Castro's son
has literally enacted overbearing Schutzstaffel powers, right? And he was breaking out windows and dragging people out of their trucks and detaining them. Now, none of these truckers hurt anybody. No cities burned, right? This is so unlike anything you saw in Minnesota. No cities burned, no cops got killed, nobody got shot. And yet he militarized his police and sent them in like stormtroopers, broke out windows and dragged truckers out of their vehicles, detained them, and if the snow wasn't too tall, detained their vehicles. And it gets worse. If you had a pet like a dog in your truck, he had your pets put into shelters. And if you didn't pick up your dog in a week, they euthanized him. So they killed your dog just like the fucking ATF. Except they would just sit there and go, well, you had a week to come get him. I'm sorry. I was being detained fucking Gitmo style. I couldn't get out of jail to come get my dog and my truck because some asshole broke out my window and dragged me out for exercising my First Amendment rights. Canada's situation is a shining example of the importance of the Second Amendment because that would protect your First Amendment rights. Could you imagine if the police showed up to this trucker thing and every trucker stood in a line with a rifle in hand, ready to go? The police would stand down because they would, number one, they'd be outnumbered. And number two, it's not a fight they want to have. They would tell the truckers, look, we just want to get home at the end of the day like you guys. We understand why you're here, but we were ordered to do this. Can we not shoot each other? And they would be like, you stay on that side of the line, we'll stay on this side of the line, and we'll negotiate. But they didn't get that option, did they? Because their government has slowly clipped the nuts off of them and disarmed them by, mandate and law and ban. Sound familiar? Because, I mean, they've been trying that here for how many years now? 50, 60?
They also don't have in their founding document a right to civil rights.
They don't have a right to bear arms either.
No, they don't.
But see, let that be a lesson to the rest of the world why our system has survived this long. Now, wokeism and all this other BS, I've been saying for a while now that the great American experiment could end quite badly because of all of that. But our system has lasted this long compared to other ones because it's set up the way it is. You have a First Amendment right to assemble and to air your grievances. You also
Right.
have a Second Amendment right to protect yourself, to exercise your First Amendment right. Remember, nobody got hurt until Trudeau militarized his police and began to hurt people. Okay?
Um,
None of these truckers
also, like
burned down a thing.
also like to add, he also signed off the Emergency Act.
Yeah, and it was the first time in Canada's history that it was used or abused, depending on the way you
Second
look at it.
time.
Well, no, I mean, it's the first time Trudeau actually did it. Like, there was no other
his father
incidents of
actually
this.
used it. Father actually used it.
So, okay. We got all that going on. You got China going on. You got Russia and the Ukraine going on, right?
How about Afghanistan?
That was
Afghanistan.
what happened in Afghanistan, our pullout in Afghanistan, that was literally like handing Putin a silver platter to his side of the world. We
Same
gave
as
him
the
the
Chinese.
keys because he saw in that moment that leadership wise, I'm not saying the individual soldier, that would be insulting. Leadership wise, we don't have a fight in us. We were like, nope, nope, we've been doing this for an entire generation of our kids. We have fathers serving with their sons out here. America's tired of this. There was an argument to be had 20 years ago that this was not a fight that we had any business being in. There is also a dirty little secret about why world powers went to Afghanistan. And I'm going to beat this drum because the numbers don't lie. We went in there. The British went in there. NATO and UN or whoever the fuck went in there. Do you know what came out of there? 3.5 trillion tons of iron ore came out of there. And who were the two biggest exporters of that? UK, US. Do you know why they did that? Because the steel industry in both of those countries are fucking garbage. And they were losing hand over fist all their business, all their foundries, all their manufacturing to China. So what did they want to do? They wanted to saturate the market with cheap steel. You can't convince me otherwise because the numbers don't lie. 3.5 trillion fucking tons of iron came out of that country. For what? How many people died for metal? A lot. You know what else they took out of there? 220 million tons of lithium. For the Green New Deal. For your stupid little laptops on wheels. Did they talk about that?
Electric
No.
cars.
Do they ever mention that? No.
No.
Is it public information if you want to look it up? Yes, I found it. You can find it too. It's out there. I mean, when we left, what was the total number? 60 billion, 67 billion dollars worth of military equipment was left behind? And then they tried to turn around and say, none of it works. Really?
None of it worked.
And then there's
None of it
videos of them driving around in MRAPs. Where's my fucking MRAP? If we're going to give
Oh,
them
there-
away, I want one in my
What?
driveway.
Oh, did you
One
see
was
that
even flying a
Blackhawk
Black Hawk.
too?
One
And
was
all-
flying a Blackhawk. Exactly.
and you know, they literally armed terrorists
Yeah.
in a foreign country, and then they come back and say, "Oh, we need to take more guns away from the American people."
Oh,
What
it's
the
even
fuck?
it's even better
You
than
armed a whole freaking militarized enemy of ours with full automatic weapons.
it's even better than that, dude. We didn't just arm them. We left them in charge of the nation we left behind.
Correct.
And then we lied to the American people saying, "Don't worry, we evac'd everybody." No, we didn't.
Bullshit.
Yeah, that ain't true.
No, we didn't. There's still Americans stuck in
We
there.
left them behind.
We left them behind.
Yeah,
That's
and
right.
do you know what happens when you do that to a country? First of all, we went in there, wasn't our fucking fight, wasn't our business. We went in there, so they were already pissed off at us. We went into a nation that has been in a tribal civil war for eons, right? The Russians tried to administer that area. They left with their tail between their legs because you cannot defeat these people because they don't care if they die. And it's one of the harshest environments on earth. Like, we used to talk to Gavin, and he used to tell us it was 140 degrees out there. That's like, you're not going to survive that day after day after day for 20 years. We tried, right? And then we turn around and we left it. After we finally gained the trust of a tribe or two, we were like, fuck it, we're out. And what did that do? That left the Taliban in charge. The Taliban went city by city, found every person who was involved with helping the Allies, and executed them. So the surviving people now have a bitter resentment. I lost my dad because he helped the Americans. Fuck the Americans. We have created an entire generation of hatred in a country we should have never stepped into.
Oh.
Guess what's about to happen in the Ukraine? Think about this. All the press conferences today. The UN stands behind the Ukraine. Or, we pray for you tonight, Ukraine. Keep fighting, right?
And also adds
Zelensky
that
came to Germany on an overnight flight to beg the UN to help. We didn't help. We'd say, we'll send you some equipment, and you have our thoughts and prayers. What do you think the Ukrainian people are going to do with our fucking thoughts and prayers while they're dying? They're going to learn to hate us. Then the Russians, when they finally do take over, if they actually win their guerrilla warfare campaign, do you know what's going to happen? They're going to be like, where is your America now? Now you know why we hate them. Now you hate them. That is exactly what we have done. We have built a system of animosity by not finishing what we start. And we've been doing that ever since Korea. If you think about it, World War II was the last conflict America finished what it started successfully. If you think about it, right?
Because it's the last time American politicians actually had the balls to do anything.
But
Period.
wait, it gets better. So we've determined that the Chinese are using the 1938 Japanese War playbook, right? We've determined that the Russians are using the German playbook from 1939 invading Poland, right? Here's what the United States playbook looks like, because it's run by the guy who basically was around when it was written. We're
It's the
using
1912 playbook.
we're using the United States playbook of Art of War circa 1913. We know that there is a global conflict going on, just like we did before World War I, and ever the opportunist, we sit around and we go, you have our thoughts and prayers. By the way, you want to buy some guns from us? Proof in concept, okay? Biden had a press conference today. And it must have been so bad because then the White House had an official press conference 2 hours later. But during his press conference, he stood up there, and for the first, I'd say, I don't know, 15 minutes or so, he sounded like what you would expect him to hear. He gave you the 411 on what was going on today. That's what a president does because that's what his speechwriters told him to do, right? He gave the breakdown of what happened. He sounded artificially angry, let's say. He sounded like a puppet because he is a puppet. He basically talked about how he was leveling the newest level of strong sanctions, okay? When he said that, you could see the entire press conference like gasp immediately. It was shocking. Like all the room got sucked out when he said that. And when he finally got to the point where he was going to take questions, which is rare because usually he just says what he wants and walks out before people start pressuring him into questions because of people like Peter Doocy. The first question he was asked, why didn't you sanction Vladimir Putin directly? No answer. Then he turns around and they were like, why do you think sanctions are working while people are dying? And his answer was, let's just wait a month or so to see if these sanctions take effect. Exact quote.
Ukrainians don't have a month. They have maybe possibly weeks.
Hours, days or hours. But you're
Days
right.
or hours,
Exactly.
maybe a week
His
at
actual quote, let's wait a month or so to see if these sanctions take effect. But like you and I agree, Ukraine doesn't have months. The people of Ukraine do not have months. Okay? They're under siege from every angle. People are dying.
At
I've-
most, they have 2 weeks. If
I've
they
got
fight
the
really
numbers.
hard.
I've got the numbers. People are dying. I think the total number was 57 or 67 killed, 168 wounded. Just today. Okay? People are getting killed. They're getting filled the fuck in. This isn't a game. Let's just wait a month to see if these sanctions take effect. Let me tell you something about sanctions. This is how fucking effective they are, okay? Iran is still building nuclear weapons. They're still developing them. How long have we been sanctioning them? How long has the IAEA been trying to get their nose in their business? Sanctions don't fucking work. You answer a bully by answering a bully with his same fucking methods. Right now, Vladimir Putin is the political version of an oil rig fire. Do you know how you put out an oil rig fire? With fucking dynamite. That's how you stop a bully. When a bully starts punching you, you don't give him your fucking milk money. You fucking punch him back. Because if you keep taking it, he'll keep giving it. That's the whole problem right now. God, I sound like a Rants and Raves episodes, don't I?
Yes,
Anyway,
you do.
but the point is he said, let's just wait for these sanctions to take effect, okay? Fine. Next question came up. Why didn't you commit to removing and expelling Russia from SWIFT? Now, for those of you who don't know, now I will admit I learned it too. SWIFT is the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications. You're going to learn something today, I'll tell you what. SWIFT is basically PayPal for countries. So most global interactions and transactions, for instance, Germany purchasing energy from Russia, like that's a good one, is paid through SWIFT. So the question was asked, why didn't you expel Russia from SWIFT? Because what that should do is isolate him from global financial transactions, which would directly affect his bottom line because war is expensive. Fair enough, right? Here's the problem with that. Last year, all the transactions through the International Banking Commission and SWIFT, everything that had to do with the Russians only totaled 1.5% of all transactions through SWIFT. Meaning, if you expel him, it doesn't really affect him. What it does affect is everybody buying from him. So, for instance, there's a reason why Germany hasn't been very vocal about what's going on in the Ukraine. You may have been noticing this. America's been very, staunch about, we support the Ukraine and you shouldn't fucking get in there, right? We got that going on. You've got some members of the EU doing the same thing. You've got the British doing that, right? You've got the French doing that. The French took that nuclear threat today and reminded Putin, hey, motherfucker, we're a nuclear power too. Fuck around and find out. Like, I was surprised. Like, I thought Macron was just a fucking junior version of
no.
fucking
no, he's got balls.
Trudeau.
He's got
He's actually got a set. His wife
Yeah,
holds
it's the-
them, but whatever, right?
First time in French history that a French leader had balls.
Well, it's
Well,
because he's not
balls.
just a fucking Pierre Cardin fucking model. He actually has a set of balls because his wife is hanging on to them for him.
Well, then he got Boris Yeltsin in England.
He's dead, isn't he?
No, Boris.
Boris Johnson.
Boris
Johnson.
Holy shit.
Johnson.
Not Yeltsin. Yeltsin's
For a
been
split
dead forever.
second, I panicked thinking, wait, do I really not know what I'm talking about?
No, Boris Johnson.
Yes. And they've all been standing in solidarity with this message of we support the Ukraine, right? Germany, on the other hand, has been like, yeah, we support you. Can we not?
They've been weak.
Yeah, they've been like, we support you, but can we not talk about this right now? Do you know why?
Dude, you know how weak these guys are? They literally gave them 500 helmets to the Ukraine military. Just that.
Well, there's a very, very specific reason why Germany's not making a big stink.
There's like
65% of all their energy is imported from Russia. They don't want the tap shut off. Now, here's the fucked up part. People are screaming, why don't you just shut down Nord Stream 2? as a punishment to Russia.
It'll affect Europe.
Well, no, here's the problem. Nord Stream 2 isn't online. You can't shut down something that never started. They built it, yes, but it's never been online. Nord Stream 1 is online, and yeah, that does feed most of Europe, and it does feed parts of the Scandinavian countries also. But Nord Stream 2, the thing that the media honed in on thinking, we got a point to make, right? We're going to get ratings with this. No. They made it sound good. The delivery was epic. We should just shut down Nord Stream 2 and say fuck you to Russia. And Russia's like, you idiots, we haven't even turned that on. Oh, thanks CNN. Anyway, so there's that, right? So yeah, the SWIFT thing, no go. The sanction thing, give it a month. Thanks for listening. And he walked out of the room. Boom, gone. Like the media went fucking apeshit. Like you couldn't hear a single question because everyone was shouting them, right? And he walked out.
I mean, yes, yeah. This is a serious situation, and you know, I'm pissed off at Russia. Everybody should be pissed off at Russia, honestly.
Sure.
Because they have no right to be doing this because Ukraine is their own sovereign nation. Right?
And this isn't the first time they've done this. Way first,
no, this
by
is
the way,
first time they've done this kind of
they
thing.
did it in Georgia back in 2008.
Right, exactly. But the point I'm trying to make is that the president doesn't have the power to declare war or move or tell NATO troops to go in and help. Okay,
yes,
that's Congress that does. And right now, what everyone listening and those of us in the panel need to be doing is telling your Congress critter, your representative, to go start doing his fucking job and vote whether we help the Ukraine or not. That's what you should be doing. And I hate to say it like this, Sean. It's not like I'm saying that this conversation is not important. It's important to let people know what's going on, yes. But it's also important to tell people to get off their ass, go contact their representative, and tell them to either vote for war or vote to have NATO go and help, because otherwise Ukraine is going down. Period. Exclamation point.
And this could be also where it leads to war crimes or worse, the repeat of a Holocaust.
If it goes any further. If Russia gets control of the Ukraine, they may not stop at just the Ukraine. They may decide, you know, we want Poland back. We want East Germany back. Don't think that's not on their mind, because I'll tell you what. Remember where Putin was stationed, you know, before
East Germany.
When he was stationed in East
He was
Germany.
the head of the Stasi.
Exactly. He was the head of 1 out of every 4 East Germans being a Stasi officer. He was the head of that. Absolutely.
You don't think he doesn't want that territory back for Russia? Because
well,
you're another story.
Here's the deal. He's already sort of telegraphed his intentions. He made a very specific point to say that giving up all the territories during the fall of the Soviet Union since 1986 was the biggest geopolitical failure in history. He wants all the Soviet satellite states to fall back under the blanket of the Iron Curtain. And the harder he pushed since then, the more that those Soviet satellite states that separated leaned towards the east, or the west, leaned towards the west. The harder he wanted them back, the more they pushed away and resisted. And that pisses him off. And the fact of the matter is at the end of the day, his original intent was not just to bring the Ukraine to heel, but he wanted to redraw the map of Russia to look like it did in 1986. So he wanted Moldova back, he wanted the Ukraine back, he wanted Belarus back, he wanted Kazakhstan back, he wanted all the Istans back, he wanted the Baltic states back.
Apparently, you know, Lushenko, the leader of Belarus, is pretty much, you know, waiting for Russia's command at this point.
He's their lapdog. He's absolutely their lapdog. He allowed more than 20,000 troops to sit on his territory until they stepped off into the Ukraine last night. So I'm trying to read this story that Daniel talked about and that you probably mentioned before we started. The Yasa Jupiter was struck by a bomb, which is a Turkish cargo ship off the coast of Odessa, which is the southern part of the Ukraine. Everybody did get off the boat safely. There were no casualties. But it doesn't say why the ship was struck in the first place. Do you
It's
know any
carrying
details?
arms and ammunition.
The
Probably
ship
can't
had
For
made
Ukraine.
no request for help, and it is currently en route to Romanian waters, has no casualties, and it's safe. It didn't mention anything about what was on the boat, though.
No, what do you think was on the boat?
I don't know, but the picture of
Lock
the
arms, maybe.
I'll tell you what,
Armed
the
forces.
picture of the
I just told you.
oh my god, I'm like really bad with ship nomenclature right now.
You get
The
port
bridge.
star-
No, the picture
Bridge.
from the bridge is amazing because it's like the whole floor is just nothing but broken glass.
Now, you know what, nice trick. You know what needs to happen? I think most of those Eastern Commonwealth countries need to unify and say enough's enough.
Well, they either need. I hate to say this, and those that are that are near Europe need to join the European Union, or they need to. If they're not part of the NATO, they need to be part of the NATO.
I mean, how
Yes.
many does Russia even have?
Well, the
Mean,
problem with this, the whole thing with the Ukraine in the first place, is if you look at the shape of Ukraine in relation to the European continent and the Asian continent and Russia itself, Ukraine is sort of like, I'm going to use a World War II reference here. There was a battle in World War II, a tank battle called Malinovka, and you've probably heard this phrase used more than the name, the salient. It was a big jutting piece of land that was elevated above the rest of the land around it. So think of the Battle of the Bulge, but more elevated, kind of a thing, right?
Mhm.
The Ukraine is a giant salient right in the middle of Russia, essentially, on the west side. And it's so close to the border, or so it's so close to Moscow that Putin's supposedly, he's on the record saying this, his biggest concern is that he's losing power, he's losing influence, and he doesn't want the Ukraine to join the UN because if they do, or NATO, sorry, I always get the two mixed up.
NATO, not
NATO.
UN. They're already
If
part
the
of NATO.
Ukraine joins NATO, they will park missiles in the Ukraine within an earshot of Moscow, and he takes that as a giant threat. And fair enough, okay, you know, parking
Keep 'em-
missiles close to your interest, pretty scary. We had it here. It was called the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? And he's trying to
Mhm.
say that that's the same thing. Hey, this is the same thing. It's like, wait, you haven't done anything to make us want to shoot you with them, so what are you afraid of? That's the right? Like that could be our response. But, you know, he's trying to
Now he's
use this
done
as some
something.
offhanded justification for for his incursions into Ukraine, saying, "No, that's too close to my home. You can't park missiles there. You should never let them into NATO because you will piss me off by doing so." That's exactly what you fucking do. If he says that, you do that thing because he just told you what he's weak against, right? But we didn't do that. What did we do? Sanctions.
And my point is that I don't think he wants that if he gets his way and he takes all of the Ukraine, I don't think he's gonna stop.
He won't stop until he has Poland.
He won't stop until he has
Oh,
half
also, look,
the eastern half of Europe.
and let me add to this: the Poles are willing to die for their freedom. They're not going to give up that territory.
Yeah, that's a
Never mind
nation
the fact
that's
that they're
known
a
nothing
member
but
of NATO.
that's a country that's known nothing but being constantly fucked with. They
For you,
fight hard. There was an entire Polish division in England during World War II. They were one of the hardest fighting air wings in World War II. They
One of the best
no
trained.
fucks given because they had nothing to lose. They came to England to have an opportunity to fight for their freedom. They gave it all, which is why they're infamous. I think it was the 303 Squadron, if I'm not mistaken. Uh,
Correct.
See, that's the problem. I'm too versed in history and it confuses people, but like I take all these things into account
Yeah, he's
because
one of
when
the
you think about what's going on right now, these things will all repeat themselves. That's the theme of
303,
today's episode
302.
here. What is old is new again.
also, you want to know how long Poles will actually fight to defend for freedom?
Go on.
The longest battle they've actually had during the Second World War was the Warsaw Uprising of 1944.
Mhm.
and it lasted the 6 straight days. No help, no aid, nothing.
Yeah, they just
And the
held out.
Soviets left them behind. The Soviets didn't care. They just left them there to get killed.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, what do you think the Ukrainians are probably pulling out of the playbook? That they're like, we'll fight to the last man. We don't give a fuck. We're going to show you that we will die for this. We may all become pariahs and martyrs fighting for this, and maybe none of you NATO or UN assholes will actually do something about it, but at least we'll go down in the annals of history of we didn't cave. And that might be true. And that would be tragic because that's the kind of people you want in humanity, to have that much conviction to stop something as evil as a fucking liar saying, I'm not doing anything, right? So anyway, let me get into this a little bit further because I still have a couple of details to go into, and then I want Scott to read something that he received today from Varosteleka, which I thought was a fascinating message, actually. So I do want you to read that. So
I'm not going to read that. I'll send it to you.
no, I want you to read it. You did great. When you sent it to me, it was fine. And I've been talking too much and I'm losing my voice anyway. So anyway, other things that happened today, because a lot happened today. Boris Johnson, as Warsaw Patriot pointed out, he put his foot down too. And he decided he was going to freeze all assets to the VTB bank. That is Russia's second largest bank. Now, that was an action that actually hurt because that has nothing to do with SWIFT. Because if you cut off SWIFT, that's the first thing they're going to fall back on is their second largest bank. He clipped the nuts off of that instead of SWIFT. That might have done more damage, considering, because not only does the Russian government use it and the military uses it, the oligarchs use it, the Russian mafia uses it. That was probably the more impactful thing. So good on you, right? And then my time. So 9 hours and 32 minutes ago, NATO held a press conference. This is before Biden's press conference. And what they had decided to do was declare that they had no plans to enter the Ukraine.
So no. Let's be super clear.
Sure.
NATO said they're going to do nothing.
Well, they have no plans to enter the Ukraine, right? So the
Which
question has
means
to be
doing
asked,
nothing.
what good are you if you're not going to do anything and you had the Ukraine begging to join you? Now you just gave them one reason not to ever want to join you because you've just left them high and dry. Sorry.
You left them high and dry when they needed you in a war.
Thoughts and prayers. It's more of that bullshit. Thoughts and prayers don't stop people from getting killed. I'm sorry.
No, they don't.
All right. So there's that. That's another facet of just shock and awe. Well, actually, speaking of shock and awe, a lot of military analysts today, they actually said that they were sort of surprised by, yes, Russia was aggressive. However, it wasn't the shock and awe everyone thought it was going to be. Now, Ukraine's a pretty good-sized country. And a lot of detractors would say that the Russians couldn't stomach the war because they can't afford it. But firing 100 cruise missiles on your first sortie, that's a pretty pricey endeavor. And that was just the opening salvo.
Well,
And I
hold on.
mean,
How much does a cruise missile usually cost?
well, a Tomahawk cost $2.5 million.
So 100, that's like $200 million.
No,
$250 million. Quarter of a billion. Now, I'm just estimating. I'm not going to try to claim that I know the
These
actual
are
money
estimates.
of it.
These aren't actual.
Tomahawks, I think, cost like $2 million or something a piece. We actually
Theirs
prefer
are
to use
significantly cheaper.
we prefer to use Tomahawks over a different weapon because it's a lot cheaper. But even then, okay, 100 of these cruise missiles, surgical strikes they call them, right? That's a pretty good opening salvo. Plus, they rolled into tanks. They were firing Katyushas all fucking day because that's like the only video we kept seeing over and over and over. Katyusha videos is over, right? So they had that going on. They still have artillery. They have the Russian T-62 version of M107 Paladin. Like, I'm sorry, I don't know the specific model. I'm very versed in armored vehicles, but the thing I saw today was it's not a T-72 Dolly Parton for sure. but the chassis looked a lot like a T-62. And this thing had what looked like an M107 Paladin artillery hull on top of it. They were wheeling those things in by the dozen. So those were pounding cities all day today too, right? You got this all going on for a country who supposedly can't afford to fight. I right? If you ever look at the net value of the world's richest people, Putin's on that list. Like he's almost at the top of that list. Because if you factor in everything he's claiming to take too, that's his. Like this is all mine now. They count that. So they can afford it, at least for now.
You know that it kind of sounds familiar in historical times?
Hmm.
You heard of a guy by the name of Nicolae Ceausescu?
Yes.
Dictator of Romania, of communist Romania.
Yeah, Ceausescu's folly is infamous. Ah.
So in a sense, it's same time period, same type of concept.
Yep.
The only difference is they don't have Putin's downfall yet.
Oh yeah, well Ceausescu's folly was he was going to build a road network so he can quickly move his forces across the country should he ever have an armed conflict. Except if you've ever looked at the terrain of Romania, it is a spaghetti of mountain roads. It's one of the greatest roads to drive on in Europe in a supercar. It really is. It's amazing. But militarily, it was the dumbest thing they ever did was build that. It's beautiful looking. It's just it's uh, logistically stupid, I guess is a good way to put it.
Yeah, because
No.
all it takes is just some aircraft to bomb the road and you're done.
Yeah.
Yes, we sort of talked about that today a little bit. So just a quick little history lesson. In World War II, naval aircraft basically made the battleship obsolete. I think we can all agree to that. Um, I would make an argument that modern air forces and drones especially, and javelin missiles, have made the tank, not armored personnel vehicles and not artillery vehicles, the tank itself. I think that what you're going to find is modern aerial weapons and javelins and drones. I won't say it made the tank obsolete, but it has made it far less useful. Maybe obsolete, because I mean, you can always double it up as an APC if you had to for like 5 people. But at the end of the day, trying to drive a tank through a tightly, you know, compacted city in the Ukraine with a 70-ton tank that can only do about, I don't know, maybe 30 kilometers an hour tops, that gets maybe 4 gallons to a mile, and then has this long ass fucking 105 millimeter howitzer sticking out of the front of it, and you got to turn corners and that thing's going to constantly bang into walls. They're not very useful in cities. They really aren't. They're made for outskirts and beating the shit out of the outsides of the city. That's what they're there for. I mean, that's all they're good at now. The drones do better work going city to city, street to street, right? We know that. We're not dumb. Helicopters do that job better too. But
Yeah, but you know what tanks do really good?
these days, not a
Putting high
lot.
explosive round in a very tight spot at a very low cost.
Yeah, but see, that's what like the Paladin does. Artillery does it better. It really does. Or
Not
just
with
aerial
fire
smart
guns.
bombs do it better. If you guys want to see, like, okay, let me base this off of something that I've seen. There was a very good film made, I think it was in 2009, and it was called Lebanon. And it was about I want to say it was a Russian, it was either a Russian or an Israeli, I think it was, no, sorry, I'm sorry. It was an Israeli tank crew in a Centurion tank, which they had back then. So this gives you an idea of the era. And these poor bastards were stuck in a conflict alone because they had no backup. They were the only running tank left, and they were still sent to sortie. And like, they just couldn't get around. The tank kept banging into things, or the barrel would get caught on something. And then when they faced another tank, half the tank plating got blown off and left wide open, and one of their crew died, and they still had to escape in what was left of this thing. Like, tanks in urban environments are terrible. Anyway, you got that going on.
That doesn't stop the Russians from using.
They'll still use them. I think what they'll do is they will use them as a tool to soften up the perimeters of cities. And then once they destroy all the buildings around the perimeter, then they can move in and destroy further and further layers of the city onion. Like, I'll give you that. And tanks are intimidating looking, too. Don't get me wrong. I mean, like, if someone rolled up in a fucking T-14 Armada, my hands are going up. I'm like, nope, don't want no part of that. Because there ain't no gun I own that can do shit to that thing. Fuck that.
No, Russia does have something that I actually was not really familiar with. Since I've been following up the Ukraine war, the Ukrainians actually were in trenches, and they weren't expecting a firefight. They were actually expecting something from above. And sure enough, the Russians were dropping off frag grenades and mortars from a operated RC drone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I believe that. Like, those are better served in tight spaces. Absolutely. Before this kicked off, they were showing videos of, like, Ukrainian military and civilians, like, doing drills and things. And what sort of blows my mind is they apparently didn't lay out the minefield we thought they were going to, because they probably didn't expect the troops to come in from Belarus and from Moldova. But if they had known
that's an act of war.
But yeah, but if you know it's coming, you should probably prepare for it. And they didn't. That's why the tanks rolled right on in. I'm shocked. I'm actually shocked. Like, I thought that's what they were doing. They were showing these guys running around in the field. There were stories for weeks that the Russians were doing combat drills along the border, and gunfire just happened to cross across the border, and a Ukrainian soldier would be wounded, like, every day. Like, one soldier would get wounded every day, right? Which means people were there close enough. You would think that those people that were wounded were probably people digging up holes to put landmines down, or anti-tank mines. But they didn't. Otherwise, there'd be a lot more than 15 tanks knocked out, and they wouldn't have been knocked out by just javelins now, wouldn't they?
I think there's a lot more tanks that have been knocked out that Russia ain't saying.
Oh, no. These are official numbers. Like, they've been confirmed now. Like, 15 tanks, 6 planes, 2 helicopters in the first day. Like, it could have added on since then, because this intel's what? Probably 8 hours old tops. So maybe. Like, the kill figures are probably different now too, but I think it was 57 killed and 160 wounded or something. I think I got it on the scrolling thing at the bottom. It's probably changed since, but
no.
Yeah, if what I heard about them attacking that certain airport that you like the name of is true.
Oh, you want me to talk about that? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. As a gross insult to the Ukrainian people, the airport that was seized is called Antonov Airfield. The Russians, as we speak, are landing Antonov 225s on Antonov Airfield to drop off more tanks. What an insult. I'm sorry. That sucks.
But then again, that intel is about 8 hours old.
It is, and the Ukrainians vowed that they would try to take back the air base. See, the air base is not Antonov. The air base is Gostomel.
Separate.
Gostomel Airfield, or Gostomel Air Base is the big one.
Is why the Russians needed to take a nuclear reactor that is melted down.
Oh, we talked about that.
The Russians ain't gonna do shit with that.
No. We talked about that. So, like, Putin says that anybody who tries to stop their incursion into the Ukraine will witness a level of warfare and retaliation that the world has never seen. And most of the NATO countries thought, oh my God, that was a nuclear threat, right? But then right after that happened, it was announced that, hey, they took over Chernobyl, which means they have access to the sarcophagus, and they have access to tons of nuclear waste. So one could argue...
Here's the point everybody is fucking missing.
What?
You already had access to tons of fucking nuclear waste.
Yes, but it's more localized to where he needs it right now.
So
like, okay, let's look at it this way. You're right. He's had plenty of nuclear waste from his own country, his own shut down reactors from, decommissioned submarines and all this other stuff. I'll give you that, right? But he would have to find a way to get it, take it, and move it without being spotted. Because you know and I know that when they decommission a nuclear submarine, through NATO rules, they cut the section of the submarine, they section cut it out, they bury it in a sarcophagus above ground so it can be spotted by satellite. We know this. We do it, they do it, it's an agreement. If he tried to move any of that material out of those sites, we would know, right? Everybody would know. The world would know. So he can't really access
Would the government say they know?
Well, we can't really access it without someone seeing it. Whereas if you took over Chernobyl as a spoil of war,
you don't think there's probably right now a dedicated satellite?
They're watching it now for sure, absolutely. But here's the point. They can either use the materials and attach it to conventional weapons and spread fallout, or as a last ditch fuck you to the rest of the world, they're setting up explosives all over it right now to blow the lid off to contaminate the whole area as a fuck you, right? That could be it too. He could be setting that thing up as one giant firework, waiting for NATO to walk into that area and just pop it off.
Here's the thing with that sarcophagus.
Yeah.
That thing was built a couple 100 yards away from where the actual reactor building was.
Yes.
For a very, very good reason.
But they had to move it and then put it over the area.
It's on rails, yes.
Yeah.
But you want to get close to where that sarcophagus is now, you're not going to walk out of there in about 10 minutes.
Well, I know you're saying that it's still a hot zone, but the fact of the matter is
a very hot zone.
You can take one Satan missile, which can carry a nuclear payload,
which they
right?
Can't actually get to fly because they had a little explosion in the North Sea.
They have these missiles. My point is,
they don't.
You don't have to put a nuclear payload in it. You just need a big, heavy weapon, and you aim it at that big concrete sarcophagus, and you crack it open like Humpty Dumpty. That's good enough. They don't have to put a man in there and open it. They'll just blow the shit open.
So basically,
were you the one saying that it was designed to take an aircraft strike?
It was designed to take multiple strikes, but a Satan missile is a doomsday weapon that's made to take out half of a country by itself. One, right? They have tons of these things.
Make them work.
They can drop a Moab on it then. Or, sorry, their version, the Tsar Bomba, if they wanted to. That thing is basically like that was a conventional weapon that
everybody is dead.
That's the point.
The Tsar Bomba is the nuke.
No. It's the biggest conventional weapon that's not nuclear. It's the
the Tsar Bomba.
That was what we answered it with the mother of all bombs. Or am I thinking of a different one?
You're thinking of a different one. The Tsar Bomba was the biggest nuke that's ever been freaking exploded on the planet.
Well, what's their conventional bomb that we made a Moab for in response? No. They made a bomb.
They don't have anything that size.
No, they made a bomb that's conventional.
They do not have anything that's that size that's conventional.
We made the Moab in response to that bomb.
No, we made the Moab in response to needing to get to some ragheads down in caves.
You're talking about bunker busters.
That's what the Moab is.
Oh, sorry. I got it wrong. It's called the father of all bombs. That's why I got it wrong. They created a bomb called the father of all bombs. Okay? It's been around since 2007. It has a payload of 16,000 pounds of explosives. It's the biggest non-nuclear bomb they have in inventory. You drop one of those on that sarcophagus, and it's going to crack open like a hard-boiled egg. That's my point. Or they probably have something like a bunker buster by now, too. Let's be real, right? Anyway, point is, we asked the question, why did they take over Chernobyl? It's on the way to Kiev. You know, it's almost like saying, hey, we're going to Disneyland, but we're going to stop here for ice cream on the way, right? How fucked is that, right? No, there is a
If you want a radiated
strategic
ice
or
cream, sure,
tactical
it's been
reason
decaying for
that
30
they
years,
took this
40.
because they know that they can litter that country, and it's like if we can't have it, nobody can. Let's be real, they would do that. This is Putin we're talking about. He doesn't give a fuck about human life.
No, he really doesn't. That's why he jailed all those protesters.
We're gonna get to that. So, General Jack Keane, who is, I believe, an instructor at the War Council Museum or War, what is it? I can't remember the name of it now. Anyway, he's a regular contributor for military intelligence and tactical information and stuff with like Fox News, for instance. I swear, he sounds like a masshole. He's got the accent, but he's eloquent and educated, and like when he talks, you can listen to him and not roll your eyes. Like the guy's smart, right? He was saying right now, as of today, he's like, the Ukraine is putting up a good fight, conventional fight. But eventually, let's be real, it's a numbers game. And he understands that Russia can defeat the Ukraine military. Nobody's doubting that, okay? Superior weapons, superior air power, superior numbers, right? He can just win through attrition. He will defeat the Ukrainian military. What he cannot defeat is the Ukrainian people. This is what Keane has been saying. He took the Chechnya example and he was like, look, back then Putin said that he would bring Chechnya to heel in 48 hours. And he did. But the problem is there were guerrilla skirmishes with resistance for 10 years. And he gave up. He was just like, fuck this, it ain't worth this shit. He invaded a nation that only had 1 million people population, and he couldn't take it and bring it to heel in 10 years. Now the Ukraine is a lot bigger, and they got a lot more than 1 million people. They could drag this out for 10 years. They could make it to the point where Putin can't stomach the idea of wasting another bullet there, which is why I think that's why he took over Chernobyl. Because if he can't stomach it after a year, he's going to be like, fuck this. If I can't have it, nobody can. Not even the people who live there. And he'll just turn it into toxic waste field. I truly believe that. And that's a haunting thought. Because you know me, my favorite game is Fallout. My whole imagination of the future. I'm like, I could survive that. I could live in that world. I don't want to, but it's a sick reality. Like, it could be, and he's trying to make it. I mean, the backdrop of this show, that's a screenshot from Metro Last Light, for those of you who are wondering where I got that. But that could be a reality, and nobody wants that. But Russia's willing to make it if they can't have what they want either, right? So the question has to be asked. Why does the world, knowing that this is a numbers game, why do they always wait until it's too late to intervene and nip this situation in the bud, rather than just waiting until the entire nation that's begging for help is decimated and harder to fight for post facto? Because now you're going to show up late. I mean, look at it like this. We were selling weapons to everybody in World War I. Maxim machine guns were on all sides, right? We were building weapons for the Russians. They made Remington-made Mosin Nagants, right?
During the Russian Empire, correct.
We were making weapons for the French Lebel rifle and the Berthier. We were making those here. We were making Enfield rifles here. We were the Lord of War. We were supplying weapons for all of them, right? So they can fight their skirmish. But we had Woodrow Wilson, who was sitting back and he wanted to be an isolationist. He was like, that's not our war to fight. But being an opportunistic, capitalistic douchebag, he was like, but we can make a lot of money on it. Let's be honest, that's what he was doing. What a dick, right? Until...
But then the ship called the Lusitania got sunk.
Yes, and that sort of forced America into pressuring Coolidge Wilson to quit being such a separatist shit. Because what's funny is, But there was a thing called the Great White Fleet. See, this is a history lesson for you guys because I also know shipping. There
I
was
know
a
about
thing that
too.
we had called the Great White Fleet, and this came at the heels of the American Industrial Revolution. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to take a fleet of ships and paint them white with gilded gold flake everywhere to make it look like the jewel of the ocean. And we went around the world with this fleet. Now, let's be honest, some of these were pre-dreadnoughts, like the battleship Texas from 1892, not the one that's in my state right now. It was the battleship Texas 1892. It was part of the Great White Fleet. We also had the St. Louis, we had the Chester, we had the South Carolina, I believe. There was a bunch. It was a good-sized fleet. And what they
Mhm.
decided to do was make it pretty, take it around the world on what they called a goodwill tour to all the other nations of the world to say, hey, look, we're the new kid in town militarily. Check out our beautiful ships. If you ever need help, give us a call. Part of that was that PR. The other part is check out what we got. Fuck around and find out what they're capable of. That was that part, right?
Mhm.
But then right when World War I kicked off, all of a sudden the Great White Fleet was put at anchor or scrapped, mostly.
No, no, actually, I did some digging into this. Actually, Sean,
Sure.
every Great White Fleet ship that wasn't either being retrofitted to meet modern standards at the time,
Yes.
or wasn't dismantled, every single ship of the Great White Fleet was reactivated as either training vessels or patrol vessels for the nation during World War One.
Ah, no. See, the battleship Texas was actually used as target practice and sunk off the coast of your state.
Those they didn't dismantle, but every other one I looked it up.
They
They
used
were
them as coastal patrol.
coastal patrol or training ships.
Fair enough. The point is we had this ache after we won the Spanish-American War to flex our muscles a bit, take a victory lap, so to speak. So we did the Great White Fleet. Afterwards, uh, apparently Europe couldn't keep their guns in their pants, and they decided to kick off a boog. So we didn't want any part of that. We were like, nah, we're still kind of small. We still have an expeditionary force in the army. Don't really have Marines yet, so to speak. We don't really have much of a modern navy. We're kind of behind. So tell you what, why don't you just send us your designs and we'll build your shit for you safely and securely halfway around the world, and then we'll bring it out to you and you can pay us. And most of Europe was like, yeah. So they did, right? Until we couldn't do it anymore. They couldn't stomach it. America couldn't stomach the propaganda of capitalizing on the misery of tens of millions of people suffering halfway around the world. Let's be honest, right? That's why I'm saying that the United States right now, or NATO right now, is playing the United States War Playbook 1912. Because they're like, oh, Ukraine, oh, you poor thing. You're in our thoughts and prayers. Here, have some helmets. By the way, if you guys need energy, yeah, we got that on sale. We're going to reopen the Keystone Pipeline. Never mind all the shit that happened to our country for shutting it down. We're going to reopen it for you guys. Fuck our people. We're going to do it for you guys because we can make more money off of you. Ever the opportunist fucking vultures like Adam Schiff. And there was one other guy who said it too. Anyway.
You really don't like Adam Schiff.
I hate that motherfucker. He's got Graves' disease and his eyes look like he's always about to pop out of his fucking head.
And he belongs in prison.
Belongs on the end of a rope. Anyway.
Yeah, but
Literally
that's
half
what
the
usually happens
Democratic,
after prison.
We've gotten through all
Democratic
that, and
politics.
I've still got 2 more bullet points to go through.
Go through them fast.
Secretary of
I
Defense
am
General
back.
Lloyd Austin has committed 7,000 troops today. Sounds good, right? Till you find
No,
out where they're
in
going.
Germany.
They're sending them to Germany. They're going to be ground troops and armored divisions in Germany. How many thousands of miles away from Ukraine is Germany? Did you
Not that
notice
far.
no mention of air power? Ground troops and armored vehicles. Why? Are we going to head
Yeah.
them off at the pass in Poland?
Well, I was about to mention the fact that we just moved like an entire aviation battalion of AH-64 Apaches to Poland,
Well,
along with 15s and F-35s.
Yeah.
oh, okay. I'm sorry. The chat at the bottom right corner is not keeping up with the chat in actual chat. So my apologies. Let me catch up on some chat here. Patrick says that the cover over the Chernobyl reactor was never designed to take bombs or missile strikes. Plus, all they have to do is go to the control room for the shell and retract it. You did mention
You don't
that
think
too,
the
Scott.
Ukrainians kind of fucked that?
Well, no, I mean, you did
Or they
mention
left?
that too. You were like, we don't have to break it open if you just open it, right? So, okay, I'll give you that. Say that you open it, and then you break the controls. Or say that you open it, and then you don't have to
Say
drop
they-
as many bombs on what's left of the reactor to spread it out, right? Because you don't have to
Say
crack
they
the egg,
broke
you just
the
open the
controls
egg.
before they left.
A failsafe.
Yeah. Well, he also said that the shell in Chernobyl was basically only designed to last 50 years. Or 100 years. 100 years. Okay. Like the shielding, I guess. And then it would decay over time. Either way.
Well,
No.
aviation tends to do that.
Oh, but, no. Besides our troops, are you guys aware that our United States Coast Guard is right in the coast of Ukraine?
That's kind of a dangerous proposition, seeing that most of the Navy of Russia's there, too.
They sent them out there. I'm like, no, we should have sent the United States Navy, not the Coast Guard. That's Homeland Security.
Yeah. Well, see, the thing is USS Seawolf is actually deployed in the Black Sea right now because they were tracking and scanning all the Russian ships in the area, and they got caught on radar, but then they evaded, and now the Russians can't find it. But it's still out there. And from what I heard, there's 2 other ships out there. Or, sorry, boats. I always say ships. They're boats.
That's
2 other,
ships.
well, submarines are called boats. But, that's just in their vernacular. Anyway, rumor has it there's an Ohio class out there, too. That's a big one. That's a big one.
And that one may not be one loaded with nukes.
Well,
That one could be loaded with like 154 Tomahawk missiles
Well-
ready to go.
dunno, wink. All I know is the Seawolf is probably one of the most powerful seafaring implements of war ever. Like, if you look at the weapon implement and the storage space of a Seawolf, it has 8 torpedo tubes. Los Angeles
Mhm.
only has 4. It's like,
Yep.
this
And
thing
an
was
Ohio
built for
ballistic
war.
missile class submarine used to carry 16 ballistic missiles.
Yeah. I mean, this thing's
which
built for
2
war.
of, due to a
So how many
trade,
Seawolves
we
are there
had to
right now?
remove, so we retrofitted them to carry a metric fuck ton
There were
of
3,
cruise missiles.
to answer your
There's
question.
3
2
Seawolves?
actually.
There were 3, but currently one is tied up in dry dock because apparently it hit a seamount near China and it smashed its
Oh yeah,
nose
the
in.
Seawolf class. Yes.
Yeah.
But the Ohio class, we had to get rid of 2 of them to meet treaty
Yes,
restrictions.
and we're replacing
So
it
they
with a new class
retrofitted them. Yeah, but we retrofitted those 2 that we pulled out of service
to be missile boats.
to be cruise missile launches. So they
Yeah.
got like 150, 180 cruise
Yeah, because they're
missiles on them.
giant. They're huge. There's tons of
Yeah.
space for it. But
They
they've only got a
basically
certain
took out
number of
the entire
VTOL
missile
tubes.
compartment. Oh no, they're all VTOL tubes.
No, I'm saying they only have a
That's the
certain
thing.
number of them. They don't have 180 tubes. They only got like I think 24 or 16 or something like that. So they got to reload them. But yeah, they got the space for it. I know what you're saying. I get it. So there's
That's
that.
a lot of firepower.
That's a lot of firepower to bear. Yes. And then here's the best part. There were protests today, anti-war protests. Did you know that the Russians have their own version of hippies? Yeah, because 1,700 of them were arrested today in only Moscow and St. Petersburg. There were protests all over the country, but the 2 biggest cities, 1,700. They're all currently on probably cattle cars on a train, being ferried off to Siberia, wearing their husband or wife's head as a hat to keep warm right now. Because I mean,
Most likely Vorkuta.
yeah, because like the Russians, they don't fucking care. Like, you're a prisoner, you're disposable. You're gonna go mine salt. Wearing
Or coal.
Yeah, wearing your wife's head as a hat. Like they're gonna just blow her head off and put it on you. Here's your skull cap. Get to work. Here's your here's your barley porridge. Shut the fuck up and get to work.
Oh, here's a question: what's the biggest prison in Russia?
Gulag?
Probably somewhere.
Siberia.
Yeah, somewhere in Siberia.
Siberia. That's where they mount. That's where they usually mine the salt and I think lithium and.
They don't use gulags, do they? Still?
Yeah, Gulag's just a name for prison. It's just their word for prison, essentially.
They're telling me in Russian Federation they have the balls and the nerves to actually use humanitarian gulags. So.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Totally.
So
like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know.
So was I know that the Russians entered from Belarus to Ukraine. So what's Belarus's stance? Obviously, it's with Russia because they let
Belarus is a puppet state to Russia.
Moldova
also is.
Yeah, Lukashenko is going to do whatever the Russians want him to.
Well, the good news is if things play out the way they're supposed to, that guy's going to end up being the next Il Duce, and he's going to have the light pole.
No, actually, bringing it up, back in 2014 or 13, it was 13 was with the Maidan protest. Mm-hmm. I remember that there was a puppet that actually was in Ukraine. I don't remember his name. He was president was under Putin.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the one that got voted out.
Correct. And then the protesters demanded to get him out of office.
Yeah, that really pissed off Putin. Actually, if you want to know how unhinged Putin has become lately, I hate to say this because, like, I used to say nothing but good things about him, honestly. I was like, that's what a world leader should look like. That's how a world leader should act. The guy's intelligent. He's action man. He jumps on submarines and checks out fucking shipwrecks. He rides bears. He goes bare-chested hunting. Like, that's a man, right? That's a man's man. But let's be honest. He's 70 years old, and he's lost his fucking mind. Like, it's time to put him in the ground. Because
70 years old?
Huh?
He will be.
It's time to put him in the ground. It's time to take that guy from Belarus and turn him into fucking Il Duce and hang him upside down on a light post.
If Ukraine lasts through the weekend, you're going to see the Russian oligarchs turn on him.
Maybe. Depends. They might be scared shitless of him still.
They might be scared shitless, but they're also scared shitless of losing everything they have. Mm. So which one's the greater fear?
I don't know. Can they overthrow him?
Which one's the greater fear? Being afraid of a dictator or being afraid of being penniless and poor?
But can they actually overthrow them? Can they buy a military force to stop it?
If you offer someone, like, say, Putin's guards $1 billion to put a bullet in his head, I'm pretty sure they'll take that offer.
Putin has escaped multiple assassinations, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, like, one can only hope. I mean, this is the guy who used to head the Stasi. He knows this game. He invented it. He literally invented it. Like, the modern interpretation.
Yeah, but people get set in their ways, and once they've been in power for a long time, they get complacent.
I didn't know he was 70 until today. I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
Mm.
Anyway.
Remember, he was in charge of the KGB and Stasi in East Germany, so he has to be up there.
I want to play a game with you guys before we end today, because I had this theory. I was asked this today. They were like, if you were the leader of the free world, how would you have responded to what's going on? And I said, before or after the festivities kicked off? And he was like, right now. And I said, well, I guess what I would do is I would demand Putin meet me in a teleconference that will be televised in the entire world simultaneously. That is a stage that he would love to be on, right? You tickle his ego by saying, I'm the President of the United States, and I'm requesting that you have this meeting with me on telepresence with the entire world, and I will let you say whatever you like. He couldn't resist, right? So you get him to agree to this, and then you introduce yourself, and you're like, thank you for taking my invitation. Before we start, there's only one thing I would like to tell you. You have 5 minutes to cease fire. And then just sit there and put a timer on the screen, and just sit there and wait for him to say something. And as the time ticks off, start looking at your watch, and just kind of keep looking back at him. And when 5 minutes expires, you just look, you go, okay. And you look off camera and you nod. And suddenly you pan to a video of the Black Sea and every Russian warship detonates almost simultaneously because those submarines that we've got in the Black Sea fired an entire salvo of every torpedo they had and wiped out the entire Russian Navy in one shot. And then
And
you
we
look
didn't even
back at
go
the
into
camera,
Ukraine.
you look right back at the camera, and you go, now you have no Navy. You have 5 minutes to cease fire. And you wait again. And then you sit there, and when 5 minutes expire, you go, all right. You nod again, and you pan to a video of Moscow exploding in multiple places all at once from airstrikes. And you go, now you have no capital. Fuck around and find out what happens in the next 5 minutes if you don't cease fire. And then you end the broadcast right there. That's what a world leader does. That's what you do to a guy who just did what Putin has done to Ukraine, because that's all he understands. We make jokes about liberals in this country, especially on my chat, all the time. The Week in Review on Saturdays. We do. We make jokes at their expense. But the fact of the matter is you will never change the mind of a hardcore liberal. You will never change their ideology. So the only way you can defeat them and their absurdity is with equal or superior absurdity. You belittle them into realizing how stupid they are by pointing out to them publicly how stupid they are. And then they don't have a face to show to public. That's how you defeat them. You defeat a bully by punching them back. You defeat Vladimir Putin by showing sheer force, because that's all he understands. He doesn't do diplomacy, because he will smile and shake your hand and order Executive Order 66 as soon as he turns away from you, because he just has to make it look like he cares. But as soon as he's out of your sight, boom, he's going to do what he actually wants to do. That's how you handle him. You should have sunk his entire navy. You didn't. Opportunity lost. You should have taken Ukraine into NATO as a thumb in his eye and say, now what are you going to do? Because that's all he understands. You rip the Band-Aid off the scab that he hates looking at. He doesn't like the Ukraine because he was worried they would join NATO.
You had it right. You poke the bear and see what happens.
Exactly.
I also like to add something.
Sure.
People always compare the United States and Russia as a similar country. And guys, it's not like America, all right? Russia is based off a kingdom.
Yes.
That's why they keep saying Putin is a czar of Russia.
Yeah.
And the difference between a kingdom and a constitutional republic, a kingdom is basically on a rule of authority and oppression and fear.
Autocracy.
And that. But also a constitutional republic has a system of, branches and all that keeps the checks and balances. Whereas Russia, they don't give a fuck.
Yeah. Well, in theory, our system is set up, with checks and balances at work. It's the best system we've got, as flawed as it is, but it beats the alternative, which is what you're saying. And you're absolutely right.
Because Russia's history is all it is a modern day kingdom.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if you look at the Bolshevik Revolution, they murdered the kingdom, didn't they?
It still is a
kingdom.
Right, but it's a kingdom of socialists and fascists, and what they lied to the people saying it's the Workers' Party, but only a few select people are in charge of all the workers. That's the problem.
It's a dictatorship. Call it what it is.
It is. It's a collective dictatorship. It's not even hive mind, because the fact of the matter is there's still a queen bee, and that queen bee still has rule over the hive. I mean, that's the way it works.
It may not have the hammer and sickle, but it still has its system of it.
Yeah. And it almost sounds arrogant to say this, but this is the darkest day in that part of the world since World War II. Because yes, you can argue the Yugoslavian Civil War. Yes, you can argue the things in South Ossetia and Georgia and all that. But those incursions didn't bring this many world actors to the stage, essentially.
I was gonna say what was it, the 50s or the 60s in Hungary when they had the Hungarian Uprising.
Oh yeah, 1960s. What was it? 1963.
When the Russians rolled in tanks to put it down.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, that wasn't just Hungary. That was also Czechoslovakia.
But I mean, this isn't okay. You're right, because those were definitely threats at the preludes of the Cold War anyway, and everyone was worried about World War III. So yeah, okay, it's close enough. But this time there's actual fighting going on right now. Like hostilities are active, media's covering this. I guess yeah, actually no, it did happen back
Or
then too. It's just better
or how about
covered now.
Oh yeah.
or how about similar to happening in
It's,
China?
it's now that the media is a 24-hour cycle.
Yes, and they
Not
regurgitate
once
the
a
same
day.
story every 14 minutes. You're right.
Well, how
No,
about
no. They change the story and regurgitate the same shit every 14 minutes.
Yeah.
But I was going to point out, how about a similar concept like with Tiananmen Square in China? That was the only time we could ever catch that.
That was the only time we could actually catch the audacity of the Chinese Communist Party
Yep.
on camera.
And they still, to this day, do not know who took the photo.
And they don't let you replay it. They don't recognize it. They try to wipe it out of the history
most
books.
people in China don't even know about it.
Yeah, they basically Baidu.com'd it, and they blocked Google. That's, I mean, literally, you can't access Google from China. You just can't. They blocked everything.
No, do you know why? Because Google helped them build the Great Internet Wall of China.
Essentially, yeah.
No, not essentially. They did.
Well, I think Zuckerberg had something to do with it too, with his Chi-Com wife.
And
That's a
you know,
possibility, but Google provided basically the AI backbone that
Yeah.
they use.
Yep.
Because they bought it. Like you can't.
Yep.
Ever the capitalist vultures. That's
Now,
another
the
recurring
one thing
theme in
that
this show
I
today.
think Putin is, shall we say, underestimating is truly
I wish
how
I
much
could get the chat to show this properly.
Ukrainians fucking hate Russians.
I'm going to apologize to those who watch this later because the chat's not keeping up very well because of the way I had it laid out. I promise to fix this later, but I'll just read it for you
think
guys.
the Ukrainians think back to like the 1930s when a certain dictator caused a famine that killed millions of Ukrainians?
you talk about the Holodomor.
I'm talking about Stalin.
Yeah, that's the Holodomor massacre.
Yeah.
I'm also
He starved
talking
him out,
about,
basically.
The whole, sorry about irradiating 100 square miles of your country.
Sorry,
not
but
only-
not sorry. Oh, hey, okay.
So the Ukrainians, I think he's very underestimating the willingness of the Ukrainians to fight against the Russians.
Oh no, they'll fight. They'll fight. Guerrilla
They'll
warfare.
fight.
They will fight for years if they have to.
You know, this isn't the first. This isn't the first time, too.
You know, I saw a
Yeah.
thing that the
2014
Ukrainians
was
had
the last
said
time.
that they literally had handed out 10,000 rifles.
Yeah. No, we covered that earlier in the beginning. They were handing out rifles to the populace in anticipation of guerrilla warfare. That's absolutely true. Patrick was saying that we should take the "it's a good day to die hard" approach and just send John McClane. He'll take care of it. Him and Jai Courtney, was it? Yeah, they'll take care of it for us.
No, I like to also add, you know, this isn't really the first time Ukraine's actually been divided. He said it was like what, 1/3 of each different populace.
Yeah, they had the same issue back in 2014, and even that wasn't the first time either.
Well, no,
I'm more of the F-35s and F-22s, and then right behind them, some of the B-52s.
I was going to point out, the Second World War. That was actually, I like that, believe it or not, and I can explain it. It's basically, so you had the Soviet Union in the East, and then you had the West. That was all German factions.
Yep.
Because the Ukrainians thought that the Germans were liberating them from the Soviets.
Mm-hmm.
But the Ukrainian populace actually sided with the Germans.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a guy by the name of Stefan Bandera. Stefan Bandera actually founded the EPA, which is the Ukrainian Insurgent Army.
Mm-hmm.
What happened, though, is that group actually split off in two factions. That faction then became part with Nazis, then the other part with its own independency. And they actually fought off both the Soviets and the Germans. And Stefan actually literally just divided up the whole nation of Ukraine.
There's There's a really, really good Russian-made movie about that actual event. And
What, the UK?
yes, and it actually takes place and shows you the story of I think it starts off with the story of a German soldier that
Hmm.
kills a Russian soldier. And then the friend of the Russian soldier, it takes place from him killing the German. And then later on, he goes and he gets killed by a Ukrainian who fought for the Germans. Like it shows you the perspective from three different angles of the story. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Like one thing I gotta give credit to is that the Russian filmmaking industry has gotten really good with war stories in the last couple of years.
Hmm.
I think if I were to recommend a couple of movies that were good from them, you'd go back to like 2012. They had this one movie called Admiral, and it was about like the Russian Reds versus the Russian Whites. And oh, what was that guy's name? Admiral something or other. He died in Siberia trying to escape the Red Army because he was the head of the White Army. And man, they detailed that beautifully. And then like they'll do hyperbole movies like T-34. That's pretty hyperbole. And then they also did The White Tiger. That's super hyperbole. But it's a good movie. They're getting better at this.
Yeah. But, like I said, yeah, look up the Ukrainian insurgent army because
Mhm.
there's a lot of Ukrainians that actually sided with the Germans, but a lot of them even broke off and tried to make it independent.
Yeah, like if you look geographically where this port of the country is, it's like you've got it's the crossroads, right? It's like Constantinople all over again. It's like this is where Europe meets the Middle East. Well, this is where Europe meets Asia. This is where East meets West. There's going to be fractured factions because that's the border of superpowers of completely different approach. You got the West and you got the East. You've got the communist Iron Curtain versus the capitalist blanket. That kind of thing. Of course this is going
Correct.
to be bad. We didn't even get into God, okay. I mean, we're almost 2 hours in. Let's touch on this lightly. Let's talk about what's going to possibly happen with China. Because I have this theory. We were talking about this with several people earlier, and I'm of the opinion that the Chinese does not need a blue water navy to accomplish what they want to do because they can island hop across to Taiwan. They can take over like Okinawa and they can work their way up to either the South Korean tip of Busan or they can go straight to Japan. You don't need a blue water navy for that because most of those parts of the ocean are still within the continental shelf. So like
Hmm.
turbulence isn't going to be too critical. Then you can also have a land campaign because right now what you've got Russia and China have a gentleman's agreement. They don't really like each other, but they're giving each other a wide berth because Russia's like, look, we want to go west, and China's like, fine, we want to go east. So where their borders touch, they're just like, you're going that way, we're going that way, we're cool, right? And everyone's like, yeah, we're cool. So you got this like gentleman's agreement. Sound familiar? Because the Germans did the same thing with the Russians. Germans like, we're going west, and Russians were like, well, that's cool. We're not going anywhere. Let's just have a non-aggression pact, right? Same thing. So now it's like, what's old
How
is
did
new
that work
again.
out for the Russians?
Exactly, but that's the theme of today's show. What is old is new again? Who's going to stab who in the back? Because right now, the way I see it, Chinese can simply take over Korea by just going to North Korea's border and telling little Kim, hey, shut the fuck up and step aside. We're going to pass through. And little Kim's going to be like, where's my trainload of Johnny Walker Blue? And the Chinese are like, right over there. And he's going to just totter off like a fat kid in a candy store. And he's going to be perfectly content. And the Chinese are just going to walk right in. And they're going to go right across the 38th parallel. And South Korea is going to be a fucking walk in the park. Right? They don't need the Navy for that, do they? But if they wanted to
Here's
skip
just the
Korea,
problem with that.
they can just island hop to Japan. And I know what you're going to
Here's the
say.
one problem with them
The U.S.
attacking
Navy's
Korea.
over there. The JDF is over there. Sorry, but the JDF is not going to stop a Chinese invasion.
India or Vietnam might.
India is scared
Vietnam has very
shitless right
limited
now.
resources.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I forgot about this. India is scared shitless right now. Biden was asked in his press conference, one of the questions he actually tried to answer was from an Indian reporter, and he said, "So have you got the commitment of India to side with you in support of the Ukraine?" And Biden goes, "I haven't even spoken to India yet." Now here's the problem with this. India is trapped on three sides like the Ukraine. They have the Russians to the north, they have the Chinese to the east, they have the Chinese to the west. Not many people know about that. The Chinese did a "we're going to take you out of the third world" campaign with Africa. On the east coast of Africa, they walked on in and they said, "Hey, Africa, we want to help bring you into the 21st century. We're going to come in, we're going to build you some roads and help you with infrastructure, and you're going to be the jewel of your continent." And the African leadership was like, "Well, that's great, but what do you want out of it?" And the Chinese were like, "Tell you what, you see that piece of beach over there that no one's using? You give us like, I don't know, 1,000 acres of that square area right there, and we'll just build ourselves like a Navy port there, a blue water port, and that's where we're going to bring in all the stuff to rebuild your roads and build your infrastructure. And you know what? We'll even bring over some of our Navy so we can protect your waters while we do all this, because you know, you've got this pirate problem. We'll help you out with that." And the
That's
Afri
not just
well,
it's not just Africa. That's the Middle East too.
it's getting better. Well, I'll get into that. But it was like, Africa's like, "So you're going to build our roads and our buildings and our airports. You're going to help us with this. And all we got to do is give you some piece of dirt that we don't even use because we can't farm on it because it's crappy desert land. Fuck yeah, cool, right? What do they care, right?" They did that. There's a Navy base there now. It's facing India. So they have a western front to India through the Navy should they need it. Because they don't have to go across the Indian Ocean where it's deep. They can just skim across, like you said, the Persian Gulf, where it's not so deep. Just like you said. On top of that, they pulled the same thing in Argentina. They did the same fucking thing in Argentina. They have a blue water port in Argentina. Now, to the west of that is obviously nothing but the Pacific Ocean. But guess what else do they have access to? A land route straight into Texas. There was a story I read, I want to say it was in the middle of January, and I tried desperately to find it, and I can't find it anymore. But they said that they took a statistic between December 1st to January 15th, and they captured over 10,000 Russian nationals at the Mexican border. And they captured something like 15 or it's either 5 or 15,000 Chinese nationals. And Haitians, where there's no land route from Haiti to fucking Texas, but they found them anyway because they were actually tearing up their papers because they were once Chilean refugees. Right? So you got China with a land base in Argentina, and they can just make a land campaign and just walk right up to Mexico and be like, "Yo, cartels, here's $2 billion, look the other way." Cartels are going to be like, "Okay, whatever," right? They have a price. Everyone has a price. So it's like, I don't think China needs a blue water navy because they just put these freaking naval bases on other countries and then they just use container ships and just basically truck in their military that way. And then they just do whatever they want. That's a big threat to national security globally. Whatever happens in Russia with the
one
Ukraine.
problem with doing that
Hmm.
is cargo tankers aren't armed.
Right, but see, so far.
So all we're gonna do is run around with submarines and use one torpedo and bye tens of thousands of troops if they
Here's
decide
the
to try that.
problem with that, Scott.
Scott, have you
So
never
far,
seen those cargo containers that can turn into missile
yes, because we have them.
Platforms?
So far, every manifest on paper is legit. Cargo ship taking cargo this many tons going to this port. That's all they know so far, right? If we catch wind that, yes, there's munitions on there, then what you're saying is we can create our own version of the Lusitania disaster, right? But you're forgetting something. They don't have a blue water navy on the surface, but they do have the Han, which, yes,
Yeah.
it's a loud submarine, but it's not louder than the container ship they're going to wear as a hat. Think about that. We saw that in fucking Down Periscope.
Yeah, and
The
I've
container
actually
ship
talked
above them is
to
going to be
people
louder
who
than the
were,
submarine protecting it underneath them.
and I'll tell you one thing. I've talked to actual people who were nuclear submariners.
Mm-hmm.
To do that is insanity. They won't go near commercial shipping for very good fucking reasons.
Because Kelsey Grammer did it first?
No, because operating that close to that big of a ship is inherently highly fucking dangerous.
Okay. It could be if you do the thing that I'm joking about from the movie. If you come up from behind and you try to split between the screws through all the turbulence and then get underneath the boat, that can be very dangerous. I will not argue that with you.
No,
But
no,
if
just being that close, as close as you would need to merge your signal with the tanker signal, is extremely highly fucking
they don't
dangerous.
have to touch the bottom of the keel to not be detected.
No, but within 100 yards of it is still
50
highly
feet
fucking
underneath,
dangerous.
it's good enough.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
You
good
want to
enough.
try and stay there all day?
Yes.
No, you don't.
Yes. See, this is the thing. They have tens of thousands of miles of ocean to get that situation
And how many
figured out.
Han submarines do they have?
I don't know. But my point is
Exactly.
we're talking what ifs in the first place, right? You were saying, what if
yeah.
we discover that they got munitions on those boats? Well, here's the simple thing. You play a Trojan horse operation. You send 5 container ships and only one of them has the munitions, which means you can take the risk of sinking a completely civilian ship with actual cargo, and then you've got to take the humanitarian fallout from the rest of the world going, you just killed civilians. And we could say,
No,
well,
you
it's...
just time it so there's a perfect storm.
Oh, God. Okay, I'll grant you that the Southern Oceans are the most turbulent in the world. Because, I mean, we've heard... What was
They
that
are.
woman? Ellen something or rather. She sailed around the world all by herself, and, man, she told some stories of her boat flipping over. That's some scary shit.
You haven't heard of the giant tsunami that almost sank the U.S. Navy?
Sort of. The worst I've ever seen
In World War
personally with
II?
my own eyes.
Like, we lost destroyers in that storm. That
I know.
sank.
Like, the worst I've ever seen is not even close to what I've heard about the Southern Oceans, though. Like, I was in the Bering Sea in the winter, and there was a really famous video that was used in the beginning of one of the seasons of Deadliest Catch, where the Northwestern was on a wave and it was breaking over the top of it, and the camera boat was in front of it filming from underneath because there was an ebb and a swell below them, right? And it was like the Northwestern crested over the top and then landed down at almost like a 40-degree angle, right? Well, that video, the seas were only about 30 feet. I was on a boat where the seas were 60 feet, and it was like when we came up over the top, you can see the screws from the other ship below you come out of the water when he went up and you went down. Like, it was sick.
Oh, yeah.
I've heard of waves in the Southern Oceans that are over 100 feet. Like, that would break a ship in half.
Called a rogue wave.
Well, no, I mean, like, just big heavy swells, because see, the difference between the oceans that most of us are used to seeing and the southern ones is there's almost no land to stop the currents. You've got a little bit of South America in one part, you got a little bit of Africa in the other part, and almost nothing in between the rest of it. So those swells between, like, the east coast of Africa to the west coast of South America, there's almost nothing in between. There's a couple of islands and stuff or whatever, but in the grand scheme of, like, ocean turbulence, it's insane. Anyway,
speaking of
we're sort
Deadliest
of veering off. Yeah.
It was in one of the scenes first couple of years where there's a scene where there's one of the fishing boats that's sinking, and you see the crew members get washed off the deck.
Yeah.
I remember that.
And you got a Coast Guard helicopter hung right there.
Yep.
The rescue swimmer, I personally know.
The survival suit
That
thing, and you've got like what, even 4
That was
minutes
the
with the
guy that
survival
had to
suit
go
on.
in and get those guys.
Yeah, that's a
He went to my high
Actually,
school.
you know, we know somebody who did that. You may not know this, but we actually knew somebody who did that.
I know the guy that was in that fucking video.
I want to say Estrella was involved in something like that.
I saw him interviewed on the goddamn History Channel about that. I'm like, he kind of
Yeah.
looks familiar. Kind of like the guy I went to high school with.
But we personally know Estrella. Like,
And
I think he was in something like that too.
Yeah, I gotta hop off.
And he was
I enjoyed being with
fucking
you.
All right,
nuts.
man. Thanks for coming though. It was a hoot.
He got
Anytime.
out. After that, he was actually assigned to Bill Clinton's honor guard as the Coast Guard representative.
Works for me. Actually,
So when you see the military guys standing behind him for honor, for like official outings and shit, that was him.
well,
Like, he's got pictures like with Clinton. It's like, whew.
I think we have
I don't know if
kicked
I
this
wanna be
horse
that
to
close to
death
Bill.
because I'm sure we're not the only people who did this tonight. And I tried
probably
to
a lot more people did.
Yeah, and like I tried to keep this as serious as possible. Like, we've had a couple of jokes and whatever and pokes and funs and whatever. Daily Wire Russia at Capitol bombing happening. Daily Wire Russia at the Capitol bombing happening. Oh, Daily Wire Russia's reporting that that Kiev's bombing is happening right now? Damn, thanks for actually saying that. Let me take a look. I'll see if I can give you some new updates. Ukrainians are waking up to evil as Russian troops unleash Putin's wrath at the capital's doorstep. Kiev is currently under attack. Okay.
From ground forces?
Yeah, this is happening.
Bombing?
So at the beginning of this cast, we said that the Russian military coming through Belarus was 104 miles away from the capital. They are now within 20 miles. Now, if we think about that, 104 miles in a passenger vehicle is 2 hours. But these are tanks, and this is armored personnel vehicles. They don't do 60 miles an hour on rough terrain. You're lucky if they do 20, maybe 30. Maybe you slow down to 5 in really rough spots and you speed up to 35 in others. You also are in a vehicle that gets about 4 gallons to the mile if you're lucky, which means you have to stop, you have to refuel, your crew needs to eat, they need to stretch their legs and, get the saddle sores off their ass. There's all that going on, right? So in 24 hours, they've gotten to within 20 miles of the capital. That is still an amazing advance. Let's just be honest, right? That's all going on. I can't
honestly,
see...
not really in modern standards.
Well, no, but modern standards in uneven terrain, in a tracked vehicle, in an organized attack from 3 different fronts with 3 different commanders at the same time answering to one world leader. It's a lot of logistics. Rocket strikes are on Kiev. The last time the capital... This is from Dmytro Kuleba. Horrific Russian rocket strikes on Kiev. Last time our capital experienced anything like this was in 1941 when it was attacked by Nazi Germany. Ukraine defeated that evil, and we will defeat this one. Stop Putin, isolate Russia, sever all ties, kick Russia out of everywhere.
That's my theory.
That's a good message. I don't have any problem with that. U.S. right now is also attempting to learn or to figure out how to train Ukrainian troops remotely.
Can't be done.
Sure it can. Send them reruns of G.I. Joe. I'm sorry, that was probably a stupid joke.
No, because there's no Cobra. They wouldn't understand.
Putin is freaking Blofeld, dude. That's the other problem. He wants to bring the world to heel, right? And he wants to bring back Soviet-era greatness. And yet, if you look at his biggest cities, they're all built with European architectural influence. Because despite the fact that he wants to be in control of basically Soviet Russia, He also wants to be recognized on parity with European culture. So what you have is Action Man, who was once very admirable to even people like me, turning into Mr. Inferiority Complex, if you really think about it. And that's
Who knew he
No,
was
he was
Napoleon?
always that guy.
I know, but it's sad
He
and it's
masked it
pathetic,
very well.
and there's only one ending to this. He will have a very ignoble ending. He will probably die in some cold, like, just non-memorable event. Almost like,
I think he'll get Julius Caesared.
no, I'm thinking more like he's gonna get Muammar Gaddafi, honestly. Like, I just have a weird feeling.
Who's gonna come out of hiding to do that? Oh wait, do you know who's still alive?
Go on.
It's a kicker.
Go on.
Go on, Scott.
Gorby is still alive.
Gorby doesn't have the fight in him, comrade.
No, he doesn't.
No, Gorby's just chilling out. Anyway, 2 hours and 10 minutes. I'm going to start to play this music because I'm beat. I'm so tired. I've had such a long day. I want to thank all of you for showing up for this special edition. I believe there still will be a week in review. It's just we're not going to have as much to talk about, I suspect. If you're new to my channel, welcome. If you're a regular here, welcome back. If you were a transplant brought over by Warsaw Patriot, thanks for coming and stick around. Subscribe, like, maybe hang out with us. If you want to be part of my server, links in the description below. If you want to be a broadcaster and do your own show, I teach how to do this the way I do it, and you're more than welcome to come and fly under my banner here. That's why we've got the different show titles in the channel lists. Anyway, thank you guys all for watching. We'll probably see you Saturday, if you don't stick around for my weeks in review or my penny arcades and all that good stuff.
And maybe, just maybe, we'll actually do a video game chat one of these days.
Maybe when the war's over.
Why? He got a little Fallout reference in here.
Yeah, I know. War never changes.
Yeah, not enough. Not enough. We need power armor.